welcome to our 10th Sasensei International Dojo SID event. We've got Yury Shkoda from Analytium, creator of SASjs Test. SASjs Test is an open source framework that allows SAS developers to test their macros, SAS jobs, and web services. So without further ado, I'll hand straight over to Yury.
Thank you, Alan, and thank you, folks, for joining this meeting. Today, I will be, first of all, my name is Yury Shkoda. I am a development team lead at Analytium, and today I will show you how to use SASjs client to provide unit testing for your SAS code. Let me share my screen. Can you see it? All right. Yeah. So here I have a project with, it's actually a SASjs project with a few pieces of SAS code. I have some jobs, like you can see here, and I also have some macros. But I also should mention that my knowledge in SAS is very limited. I am not a SAS person. I'm a JavaScript person. So I will use an extremely simple SAS examples, but I believe you will be able to understand the main idea and how to use this approach. The first thing I would like to mention, I would like to show you SASjs config. So this is a special configuration file that SASjs is using for configuring so-called target. And by target, I mean SAS server that we will be using for deploying our SAS code and our unit test as well. And I have a few targets. One of them is VIA, called VIA, and it's a SAS VIA server, which is located at this URL, and we can also provide a location of our future app. But the main thing that I would like to show you here is test config. And here we can provide a configuration for the test commands that we will use later on. And right here we can see that I provided test folders. We can provide multiple test folders because it's an array. And at my local file tree, I also have a tests folder. And we can provide test init, test term, test setup, test teardown. And here are 4 local files, test init, test setup, test teardown, and test setup as well. So what is the purpose of test init and test term? It's a special pieces of logic that we will include for every test case when we compile the test. But I will discuss it in more details later on. And test setup is a special kind of test that will be executed prior to all the rest tests, and test teardown is a special test that we will execute after executing all our tests. But test setup and test teardown are not pre-configured. You can do whatever you want inside. So I just have some dummy SAS code inside just to show you how it works. Okay, so first of all, I will use SASjs command to compile my project. And I can do it by using SASjs keyword, compile command, and I will do it for target called VIA, -t VIA. All right, and from the beginning we can see test coverage, and unfortunately we have 0% for jobs coverage, for macros coverage, and we can see exact files that are not covered. And here are 5 jobs that are not covered and 3 macros that are not covered. And if we check file tree, we can see, yeah, I have 3 jobs on the extract folder, and I have 2 jobs on the load folder. And the same for macros. I have 3 files that are not covered. All right. So to provide coverage, we need to create a test file with the same file name as, for example, macro or job, but with test postfix. Let me show you how to do it. And before, let me bring one more file. I created a few of them just to save time and to avoid maybe some typos. For example, I have additional macro, demo SAS, which is extremely simple. It has only one string, hello world, right? And next to this file, I will create a test file called demo.test.sas, yeah, with some logic inside. And if I run compile again, and by compile, I mean that in our files, we can mention some dependencies that we would like to include in the file. And when we do the compile, we kind of bring everything together. All right, let me run compile again. And at this time, I can see that the amount of macros that I have increased by 1. Now I have 4 macros, but I also have 1 test. So the coverage for the macros now is 25%. The important part to understand, SASjs doesn't look inside the logic of this macro, and we do not provide the coverage so-called by lines. Instead, we analyze if there is a test file with the same name as, for example, macros, then this macro is considered covered. All right. And I should also mention that I made a few mistakes intentionally, and I would like to fix them together with you as we go. All right, so now we have a few macros and a few jobs, and 1 macro has been covered by unit test. And let me delete this folder and run this command again, compile. When we run the compile, a specific SASjs build folder has been created. And inside we have compile jobs and compile tests. And right here I have a test setup, test teardown, and you can notice that these files are much, much bigger than it's been originally. For example, for the test teardown, originally it was just 10 lines of code. But when we compiled it, it has much more code inside because we put all the dependencies together. All right, and it is very interesting that we also create test flow file. It's kind of a configuration for the test flow to provide information in what order we need to execute our tests. All right, so the project been compiled, and now let's deploy it. And by deploy, I mean let's put our SAS files on the SAS server. And currently I will be deploying to the line. And to do so, we again need to use SASjs command, and we need to compile, build, and deploy. And we have a shortcut for these 3 commands that you can execute separately, but you can just type cbd, compile, build, and deploy, and use target via again. All right, so we can see a coverage report again, and currently it is in the process of deploying these files. All right, it's done. And to trigger our test for execution, we need to use SASjs test command. We need to provide target via, and all our deployed tests will be triggered for execution. And execution will be done according to the test flow that we created during the compilation process. So we have a test setup, which will be run before all the tests. Then we will execute tests for the demo macro. And after that, we will run test teardown. All right, we got an error, but it's been expected. So basically, test teardown did not provide the result. And here is an error about it with a link for debug. Let me log into our SAS server, and we can use this information for debugging purposes. And here we also have a code snippet which will help us to provide this test result. Let me copy it. Let me close it, and let's go to teardown file. So let me make it a bit prettier. Right. So what's going on? SASjs test command will be expecting web out with a specific table. This table should be called results, and with a few columns like test description and test result. And we also created a few macros to help you provide an assertion, which you can find on core.sasjs.io. And we have a few of them, but let's discuss about it later today. So basically what I did right here, I manually decided if the test passed, and SASjs test command expect two possible outputs for the result, passed or fail. So you need to manually decide if you test case passed or failed, and you can also provide description. All right, if I recompile my project and redeploy it using cbd command, compile, build, and deploy, and target via, all right, it's ready, and let's trigger our test. Let me make my console bigger. So all unit tests are executing in sequence, one after another. As we can see, the first test was test setup. Then we triggered demo test, and after that, test teardown went for execution. And now all three tests passed for me, which is awesome. Let's create a few more tests to make it a bit more interesting. All right, let's see what else do I have. All right. If you would like to provide not one, but multiple test cases for the single macro or job or anything other, you can create a sequence of test cases. And it's quite easy to do by providing an ordered number after test. Let me show you how to do it. For example, if I create file demo.test.2.sas, and I will rename this file to be demo.test.on.sas, I will execute these two test cases in sequence. So number one will be this one, and after that I will run second test case. And you can create as many test cases as you want. And let me also put some logic inside. All right. And quite interesting that I'm using npm assert macro in this test case, which I'm getting from the core library. So the core library is a set of different SAS macros, and which should help you with your development. All right, and let's analyze what we have inside. In the first test case, I've been asserting if my demo macro has a string hello world, and it is obviously true, right? And in the second test case, I will be checking if demo macro has aloha string, which is not true, right? So this test case should fail. All right, let's create a few more test cases, and I will create one for jobs. I will drag and drop. All right, and this test case is using a slightly different approach. We are not using assert macro from core library. Instead, we are using some local assert macro, which I have right here. All right. So basically, you have freedom on how to create this assertion mechanism, and the only key points that you need to return the result with expected values, pass or fail, and you can also provide a description. All right, let me also create one more test. Actually, two more. All right, on the load, I will create this file. And I will create this test case. We should go in jobs as well, extract folder. All right, let me recompile the project. Here we go, and let me deploy it. So you can see that I improved the coverage. Now I also covered 2 additional jobs. And interesting enough, check that out. I have a standalone test, which is located under jobs, extract, and Friday. That's the file. And because we don't have any macros with the same file name, Friday, it is considered as a standalone. And you can create as many as you want standalone tests. All right, so I just finished the deployment, and let me trigger the tests. And again, let's check the sequence of execution. Oh, sorry, this one. Flow. Again, test setup, test teardown, and we have 5 test cases for execution. Then number 1 will be Friday, then make data, then run job, and we have 2 test cases for demo macro. Should be ready in a minute.
Yeah, as you can see in the URL there, we also pass the context name. So if you're using a different compute context at the back end, you can specify that.
Yes, exactly. And every test case will use a separate session, so it is completely isolated. All right, so we got a report in our terminal, but it is not everything. So we also created SASjs results folder containing all the logs for the tests. And you can see I got a, let me make it bigger, a log for the Friday test, for the make data one, for the demo test one, and so on. And we also created a report in 3 different formats: CSV, JSON, and XML. Let's, for example, open a report in CSV format. Open results, test results, CSV. All right, let me make it bigger. So such file has been created with the same output, with SASjs test ID, with the result, and also with the test URL, which you can use for debugging purposes. And let's also take a look at, for example, XML report. Oh, pardon me. Let me use my browser. So you can use XML as well. And the last one was JSON, which is looking like this. So basically the same information, but in different formats. All right, but let's say you have multiple test cases and you are working on fixing, for example, Friday test, and you don't want to wait you don't want to trigger all your tests in order to debug Friday unit test. And you can use filtering options for the test command. So basically, after test, you need to provide a string that will be used for filtering. For example, Friday. We run it. But it is important to keep in mind that test setup and test teardown will be also executed regardless of filter. All right, this time we only executed test setup and Friday. And it's not necessary to write the whole word. Instead, you can provide just enough information that will be that will satisfy the regular expression used by filtering mechanism. For example, if I would like only execute maybe second test for our macro called demo, I can just type SASjs test 2 for target wire. Here we go, and it should work. Let's check it.
Yeah, this is a great way to run individual jobs or even all the jobs in a particular folder.
Exactly, but it is not the only option that you can use for filtering, because remember, while compilation process, we also create test flow. So basically, you can modify this file, and for example, I would like to leave only run job test case. So if I just delete all the rest test cases and run test command again, one more time, test setup has been executed first, and then we executed run job. Yes, run job 1, and after that, tear down. And here is our report. So I will also drop links for the core micro library, and I will also drop a link to the documentation of SASjs test command. We have a few examples how to use it, what options do you have, and in the same place you can read more about the CLI itself and what options you have, because as you can see right here, we have multiple commands that can be used to make your SAS development much easier, and as a result, make your life better. That's basically it for my presentation. If you have questions, please feel free to ask. I will be happy to answer.
So yeah, feel free to unmute yourselves, guys, or put a message in the chat box. I'd urge the rest of you not to leave yet, because we do have a networking event straight after this. I'll be sharing the link in the chat. Of course, if you have questions but you'd rather ask Yury personally, then yeah, come to this event that we're about to host, and find Yury. We'll both be there. So if I don't see any hands, what I'll do is I'll stop the video in a second and share the link for the event. Okay, so yeah, thanks Yury.
You're welcome.